If you think you can do something, you 1,000% can. If you think you can't do something, you still can do it. You're just making it harder for yourself.
Welcome to the 9 to 5 Quitters Club, the podcast uncovering the creator entrepreneurs at the forefront of a work revolution. Today, we're speaking with Timm Chiusano. Tim abandoned a college degree in Canada and worked his way through various production companies to become an executive at Charter Communications. There, he started posting on TikTok as a creative outlet and built a huge following in a matter of months. After a year of responsibly firing himself, Tim left his executive job to go full-time as a creator, helping others to navigate and improve the culture and systems of corporate America. In this episode, we'll explore some of Tim's unique journey.
I wanted to go as far away from that as humanly possible for a few different reasons, including the fact that I didn't want my parents to find out that I didn't have a college degree.
His mission to empower leaders and bring positive change into every work environment.
There's going to be 10,000 people that change the world, and it's going to be the top 20 people at the Fortune 500 companies. And if I can help get some of those people to be like, wow, I can impact healthcare, environmental policy, hiring practices, I can eliminate the need for a bachelor's degree.
And make sure to stick around till the end for Tim's sage advice on how you can leverage your experience in any industry to break through the noise.
So say you're working at that restaurant. What can you learn about how they opened it in the first place? What do their books look like? How much are they spending a day on produce? Do they have any marketing, and does it work?
Talking with Tim was an inspiring dive into what it takes to invent your own path and how sharing your experience with other people can be the key to unlock the life you've always wanted. Let's dive in, and we hope you enjoy this conversation with Timm Chiusano. Tell us about how you got to this point, breaking out of this convention of a 9 to 5, which you did a little later in life.
Absolutely. It feels like it was 30 seconds ago. So I feel like this outside of 9 to 5 is maybe a day old at this point. I'm a 46-year-old former corporate executive. I was the vice president of creative and production services for 10 years at a company called Charter Communications, mostly known for Spectrum, which is the second biggest cable company in the country. Started making TikToks off the side of my desk in 2019. August of 2019 was my first one. It was more for just, creative outlet, but also there was some business purpose to finding out what TikTok could do. Head of a large internal creative services department that had to turn around about 20,000 pieces of creative on an annual basis. Having a quick turn, how do you go from capturing to editing to putting somewhere live in a very short period of time? TikTok, after Vine, was kind of the next cool platform that could do that. I was almost more curious from a workflow perspective, almost more than anything else. But at the same time as well, Gary Vaynerchuk was talking a lot about TikTok and, the potential opportunity there. And I was a bit of a low point in my career from a headspace perspective, just kind of dealing with all the things that everybody deals with. What have I become? Where am I going? What does this all mean? Those types of things. So having a creative outlet was fun as well. I did love my job. Like at the core of it, if you've ever seen a small business on TV, there's like a 95% chance that somebody on my team made that commercial, right? The old cable company deal was you got 2 minutes of local advertising time for every hour that you would, have ESPN on locally in Madison, Wisconsin. And that's how Joe's, Hyundai dealer or the new restaurant down the street would actually be on TV or in, some sort of streaming service. Started making content, see what the workflow's like, scratch a creative itch on my side because I did a lot of the people management, but I did zero actual creative, even though we were doing 20,000 pieces a year. And I just loved the process. All of a sudden, it felt like I was taking my mental vitamins simply by making a piece of content before I was on my way out the door in the morning. I'm known for time blocking and for having a pretty rigorous day. And so I just started capturing it and honestly had no idea that there would be any kind of interest in a dude in his mid-40s who wears a suit 4 days a week. Never thought that there was anything there other than this is fun. Literally nobody that I knew was on TikTok when I first started making them. So doesn't really matter what I do. Like, you just keep going with it. And I didn't see an end result. I didn't see, hey, this is my way out. I didn't see anything in it other than this is just fun. It certainly started to snowball. And then it got to a point where it's like, if I don't get out now, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. And I'm also not going to be able to capitalize on some of the biggest opportunities that I have right now. And I don't know how long those are going to be around for. So I got to figure this out. And then I spent the last year basically not basically, I've spent the last year responsibly firing myself
Hmm.
because I wanted to leave the right way. Large team, large marketing department. I knew the kind of impact that I had from a, personality and demeanor perspective from a leadership side of things as well. And I wanted to do it the right way. And so now this is like day 75, somewhere between 75 and 80 for me on the other side. But it feels like day 4 or 5 maybe, because the summer was just an absolute whirlwind of family things and house guests and all that. Now I'm finally like, cool, I need rigor. Like I need hardcore rigor to be able to keep myself sane. So I feel like I'm still very much fresh on the other side of this.
I am curious because you wore a variety of hats in your corporate career. And now, as a creator, you're wearing probably even more. Since you're pretty early on, is there a hat you wear that you carry through this as kind of core to your identity? The other way I like asking this, what do you see yourself being into your late 80s?
A dad, honestly, that's where I go first and
Mm,
foremost. Like self-employed dad is what I use in a lot of the intros now for my videos. POV, you're a self-employed dad doing blah 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 blah. Because I get the term creator, I get all of those things. I mean, CEO resonates as well, but I don't know that I would be a CEO in my 80s. But a CEO has to be a generalist, right? So they need to be able to do all of those things super
mm.
well. They need to understand those things at a high enough level to be able to kind of like direct everything in a certain, area based off of how they see the vision for the entire organization. So CEO to a certain extent, but like self-employed dad, writer, is something I could totally see myself doing into my 80s. So it's a little bit of everything, but I'm really fortunate that I have the corporate hardcore background to help guide all of it, because I don't have a college degree, but I got 20 years of experience in corporate America. And 10 of those years, starting at what felt like a super early age of 35 at an executive level at a big matrix organization that had all kinds of complexities, and they were really generous in how they invested in me as a person, with going to Harvard for executive coaching classes. And at one point I was joking around with a friend that I was being turned into a corporate monster because I was being taught all of these things so well, right? How do you run a large P&L? I had to fire all 100 people in my department and start the place from scratch within the first 6 weeks of
Oof.
the job, which was something they told me the Thursday before my first day of the job. So I, I resonate most with just being a dad. And honestly, being a stay-at-home dad was the dream job I always had in the back of my mind as a kid. It was like, that sounds dope. Like if somebody's going to take care of the household, so to speak, and is making the lunches and is helping just run things holistically, cool. I'll do that. And then all of a sudden I blinked and I was 45 and making TikToks, doing all these things. I'm like, I actually have a shot at this now. Like I dropped off my kid this morning. Today's the day where my wife will be at work for about 16 hours because she's a small business owner. This is the first Monday of this new routine that we've had, because basically both of our lives changed, earlier this year. And I'm so excited to go pick her up. And then we're going to have homework. And we haven't decided what we're going to do for dinner yet. And I want to make sure the laundry was done and make a piece of content and do like all these things. And if I can time block it into a day, like it'll get done. And I need between 4 a.m. and 10 p.m. to get it done. So CEO of my own world and dad, because that's the most important job I'll ever have. And hopefully some fun creativity along the way too.
You said you didn't have a college degree. How did you get into your space?
A lot of part-time jobs.
Mm.
Lot of part-time jobs. All I knew was sports and marketing sounded really interesting. Sports and production sounded really interesting. Sports and just about anything sounded really interesting. My dad was in radio sales, and I wanted to go as far away from that as humanly possible for a few different reasons, including the fact that I didn't want my parents to find out that I didn't have a college degree. And I had a friend that was working at ABC Sports, and he was like, I can make some introductions to somebody I played hockey with. They were always looking for people that were willing to come into the ABC studios on a weekend, basically hang out and watch games and get paid peanuts, go get coffee and fill up water coolers and take notes and run papers around it. This is like 2001-ish. I was down for anything. I was like, cool, this just starts to build. And you start to talk to more people like, hey, go on this job listing site and you can get these PA gigs, and there'd be HBO freelance producers that would need day hires to go be a grip or to go run around with a clipboard. And I would just like stack all of these experiences. And over a couple of years, and, first in the door, last to leave. Hey, I'll do that. I don't care what it is. Like, I'll just take anything. Oh, cool. You're doing this on Saturdays. Can you come in on a Sunday? Do you mind Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock to go do blah, blah, blah? Yes, 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 yes. Get to a place where they're hiring for seasonal production assistants for college football. And you were guaranteed one season, and that was really it. Got accepted into that program, or whatever you want to call it, because it really was just like a contract basis gig. Didn't really have a shot of sticking around too long because I was on the worst college squad, because the squad I was on mostly focused on PGA Tour golf. And so they would do the regional college football games on random weekends. Luckily, because they did golf as well, and because I did a good job, they're like, hey, do you want to come back in January? We've got the Bob Hope Classic in Southern California. And so the answer to your question is really, I just took everything that I was able to get my hands on and just built until I was in the door. And then once I was in the door, it was off to the races, and I got promoted like 5 times in my first 5 years at ABC Sports, switched careers because I got nervous about traveling 36 weeks a year as a production assistant once I got married. Switched careers and was able to make this argument that I could be an in-house diplomat between the marketing department and the production department, which got me into ESPN for my first desk job. Did that for 7 years and got promoted several times there as well. And then got this massive opportunity at 35 to go run a 100-person department for what was then Time Warner Cable Media. Also because I went to school in Canada. I don't have a degree, but I did spend some time going to school. And I think the fact that I went to school in Canada and was very vague about how it was referenced in my resume, it was kind of like, oh, he went to school in Canada. Like, cool, we'll check that box. Like, I'm not going to call Ontario and be like, hey, did Tim go there? And kind of rolled the dice. And next thing I know, 20 years had gone by. And then my parents found out through a TikTok last year. And I was like, I'm so sorry. That was so horrible of me to keep that a secret for 20 plus years. And then all of a sudden your mom calls your wife and is like, did I just see what I think I just saw? And is that real? Like, he really, really, really doesn't have a college degree. And so...
Stick around. We'll get right back to talking to Tim after this short message. This podcast is brought to you by Teachable and therefore has no sponsors. So we just wanted to take a moment to encourage you to go check out Tim on Instagram, where he's paying forward 20 years of experience through his lovingly masterful storytelling. Creators like Tim are the reason this podcast exists, so supporting them helps support our ability to bring you more of their stories and lessons. You can find Tim on Instagram at Timm Chiusano, which is also linked in the show notes or description wherever you're watching or listening. Okay, now let's get back to the episode. My path is somewhat similar. Didn't go to college and then just worked in food, music, a bunch of stuff. I'm curious if your experience was at all similar. I definitely had extreme moments of self-consciousness around starting in a bunch of different industries over and over. Because I didn't have a degree, there wasn't a way out. Then in the last 3 years, finding my way into tech, a lot of those experiences have ended up being very directly applicable. Stuff I learned in kitchens about management or working in teams and stuff like that. Did you ever question your path throughout there until you were at a certain point? And then was there a point where it kind of all clicked, the skills you had built made you who you were?
Absolutely. The last boss that I had sitting in his office and realizing how well we worked together and that he was a Harvard MBA dude. And then I could have the conversation with him about the fact that I didn't have a degree and being like, wow, you don't look at me any differently. You fully respect everything that I bring to the table. This is the best working dynamic I've ever had in my career. I should 1,000% just own this. I have nothing to be ashamed of. Ironically, happening in parallel, I started having conversations with the ad council around something that they call tear the paper ceiling, which is awareness and advocacy for people without college degrees. The fact that you and I would be called STARS, which stands for skilled through alternative routes other than a bachelor's degree. And exactly what you just said is the point that they're trying to make, is that I was an elevator operator one summer, and it was like you were a lobby attendant, but then you actually had to like operate the elevators and like call them up and down in this old building in Midtown Manhattan. Exact same example that you just gave, where it's like the relationship building skills relative to the people in the building that I knew. They'd be like, "Oh, good morning, sir. Like, have a good day at your lawyer's office on the 32nd floor," and just like know the different predilections that people would have and how to interact with people where they were versus how I thought I should do it because of who I was. And like all of those nuances, even just the skill of somebody stops you in the lobby and says, "Hey, do you know where the nearest ATM is? How quickly can you give them the clearest directions to get them there?" That's, simplifying things. Those things that at face value, you're like, "Oh, that's a bit of a stretch." You're like, no. You do that time and time again, day after day for a while, and you are legitimately growing skills in these other areas. So it was a fun realization to have with my boss, but even better to work with the ad council. And it's stuff I'm actually going to start talking about a lot more on LinkedIn, because I do think that from what the stats say, like it's a very underutilized resource in corporate America. Like the fact that there's like 70 million of us out there, I think, and that's like a real number, that just go somewhat underutilized in corporate America, or even the job marketplace overall, is kind of nuts.
It's hard to map out advice for someone who's maybe working in a restaurant. Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get into corporate America, even if it's just to have more of a career because they don't see a future there? How to represent yourself in a way that will get you even that first job that validates you?
It is quite literally just making the most of whatever you have in front of you. But this is what I mean by it. So say you're working at that restaurant. If it's a mom and pop shop restaurant, what can you learn about how they opened it in the first place? What did they go through to become the entrepreneurs that they became, to grow the staff the way they do? What do their books look like? How much are they spending a day on produce? How many orders go out the door in a day? Do they have any marketing, and does it work? You could do that for either a mom and pop restaurant, or especially a place that's like tied to some sort of global organization. You work at a Taco Bell, and in theory, you have access to all of the, because I believe they fall under the Yum umbrella that has God knows how many fast food chains. You have access to all of that training. You have access to like all of these different things that then have, can have an impact on how you see the workforce holistically. If you're able to see that opportunity and how you can learn on a daily basis in all these pockets, you get curious about whatever might just pique your curiosity naturally. You start to layer that into then why you should have that entry-level marketing job at Taco Bell or at Yum or at God knows where. You're like, I worked at this restaurant. This is what I learned. I remember spending, extra hours off, like going through all the flyers that they put out for the past 4 years and like learning ROI metrics in regards to like what worked. And that could be, they printed out flyers and spent $1,000 annually. Like find that story, and don't forget about the fact that you are always going to have access to all of these things to learn from if you can find it. And then if you actually care to basically farm that information for yourself, layer that on top of your own unique story in regards to what your path was throughout it, you're gonna stand out. I get asked by so many people, "Hey, can you check out my resume?" 9 times out of 10, they're not telling their own story as effectively as they could. They don't utilize the fact that there's metrics and information that can layer into like the impact that they've had. They just look at this like one vertical of like, how do I go through these things and how do I just kind of like escalate myself, versus here's my story, here's how it resonates, here's how it ties back to the things that I'm curious in. And then therefore, based off of your business problem, this is how I can help pull from my specific story to help you accomplish your end objective. And it probably sounds more complicated as I explain it than it is, but it's literally like, learn from the stuff around you, apply it to your story, and then tell somebody why your story helps them accomplish what they're looking to do versus why you're good enough for that job. And to me, those are two completely different conversations.
Can you dig into that just a little more? Because I do think the why you're good enough for something is what people default to and maybe end up sounding like everyone else because they're trying to look like someone else.
Say you worked at Baskin Robbins or an ice cream joint. You're always interested in the creative space or in marketing or in advertising or something. I'm making all this up off the top of my head, but I think that this is like as simple as it could be. You notice that the window clings get changed every month. And when they change, there's either immediately a spike or a decrease in a certain flavor coming or going. And you have a really specific idea as to what could help drive sales more based off of what they're actually shipping you in the store. So you're like, if I was doing this, this is what I would do. Then from the inside, you're able to say, I was there, I was observing. Here's a very specific business case that you were going through. And you don't even have to be right. You just have to have the thought, right? That is such a different conversation than I went to marketing school, I understand these things. If you can say, I observed this, this is my perspective on that. Your objective as a marketing department for this company is to do this. My story, my observations gave me this nugget of information put on the table. And to me, that is so different than, cool, you've got this amount of experience with this and you know how to use this program and blah, 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 blah. You're then like in a slightly different way, almost being like a thought leader in the space. It's going to be a way different conversation than 99% of the other interview conversations.
I love that. I want to get back to kind of your journey. John Yushai, big YouTuber, talks about how everyone thinks that YouTube is getting Mr. Beastified, but that people should look out for the Dr. Mike-ification of YouTube, the kind of hidden killers that are on these platforms making content. As someone who didn't look at their years of experience as wasted time, but actually an asset, was that obvious for you? What was that process like? Was there a light bulb moment? Because I think a lot of people are like, I want to quit my job and start a photography business, not leaning into their life as it was.
I'm a huge nerd overall, and which I define as I will, to gross extents, do research into places if I'm at all curious about it. So as the content creation world started to open up, everything that I could get, every Colin and Samir podcast, every newsletter I could sign up for, who are the thought leaders in the space, who's doing it well. Yes, I'll happily take a ticket to VidCon to go just to observe and learn. Who are the friends that I can make and build? And so through that, one of the biggest takeaways that I learned was, what is your unfair advantage? That helped me stick out of the pile while I was in the muck. But being in the muck is my unfair advantage. So how do I unearth that the best way? All of that experience, and I see this with a super straight face. There is the 1 in a million thing that happens in people's careers where like, I don't know what to do about this, happened at least a few dozen times over the course of the last 10 years. I saw it all. I also know that there's a lot of people out there that are stuck in corporate America that could use help. And based off of how I would help on a day-to-day basis in my job and what people were seeing in my videos, to me, that just seems like the smartest space to lean into. And I'm of the headspace now where I firmly believe that if I bring the most value to the table, if I truly provide the most useful content that I can, that will reap long-term rewards for me. I want to say I'm not smart enough to look at it the other way where I'm like plotting out like, oh, this is what the revenue generation could be for X, Y, or Z. I'm more leaning into, let me get really smart about what is that syllabus that I can extract from my head. And then where are the best places to put it to grow the most trust and awareness? And then take it from there. I mean, I think that premise of the Dr. Mike-ification is, I hope it's spot on. I think Ali Abdallah, proved out a really smart model with that as well. I just gotta, I see this world where like Mr. Rogers meets corporate America tutorial videos.
I love
and
that.
that's how I can like find this, overlap of fun and approachable, but then also like get into the rigor of, let's talk about what a P&L is, what it does, and why you should care about it today. Like I've got way too many of those ideas in my head. So I wasn't built to do that other thing. Like my purpose is to help people do their best work by being the best version of themselves. That was my purpose as a boss while I was there on a 9-to-5 basis. And I would argue that that's just my purpose as a human being overall, but specifically as a content creator, I would say that it is 100% just doing whatever I can to help others do their best work, whatever they may choose it to be, and enjoy the process. Like, somebody's got to have their backs out there. Like, I know how crazy it can be. I know all too well what it's like to be stuck in the muck. So how can I help?
You'll do an hour just sitting pretty much unedited, except for when you go eat sushi and just talk. Was that just the easiest and most natural thing for you to do, or was that a very calculated choice?
It's both. And here's why I say it's both. Because if you can't execute it and get it out the door, then it doesn't matter. If you can't bring it to life, then who cares what the idea is? I've got 1,000 just bonkers ideas that are pinging around in my head. But some of them could take 2 years to actually end up seeing the light of day, either because the production process would be way more than I have the capabilities for right now, or it's just complicated, or I need seasons to change. Like, there's just all the kinds of reasons. But once this all started to happen, I'm like, all right, there's more I can do here, especially in that format of talking to the camera, delivering whatever information. It's build a PowerPoint, set up 2 phones in my basement, because that's what I shoot everything on, with the exception of my webcam, and do one overhead, one in front of me. And if I have to edit that myself, then I can do that. I've got some editing help, but only for long form stuff right now. And it was really just, how do I make more stuff quicker, but that the stuff is actually usable, and to not care if that video about rewriting your resume or your purpose statement gets, a few hundred or a few thousand views out of the gate. Like, I can't have expectations that all of a sudden someone's gonna be like, wow, this dude solved all the resume writing problems in the history of the world in a single YouTube video. I think I've got a very specific and a very helpful perspective on it. And I'm much more comfortable in one-to-one conversation than I am when I'm trying to talk to a camera to like force something out, if that makes sense. And so what if I can put it into a PowerPoint and then I pretend like I'm just presenting to the individual on the other side? It's way easier than like having to make something up or having to do some sort of, one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm trying so hard to like control it, is there's a ton of content out there in the corporate space where the person is like talking to they're talking to their laptop, and it's like facing this way, and it's one character, and it's facing this way, and it's another character, right? A vast majority of the scenarios that they bring up, there's like a hard stop of boundaries or communication issues or resource challenges, etc. But it doesn't teach the viewer anything other than, here's how you can feel justified in not liking that, or like, here's how you push back. But it never solves the problem. And it's why they can do the video over and over and over again. And my issue with it is not because I'm like, no, fuck that, open up your laptop at 5 o'clock. Like, no, that's not what I want to say. What I want to say is, and I don't know how to deliver the message eloquently yet, is if those types of things are happening on a reoccurring basis, you should know how to ask why the right way, so that something changes. Because otherwise, you're just stuck in this vortex. And it's part of the reason why I worked my ass off in corporate America was, if I ran to the front of the line, I could slow the rest of it down, or at least I could try. If you think that the merit increase policy sucks ass, then go be the boss and oversee, where is the budget coming from? How does that get allocated? Those kinds of things. It's complicated and hard, but like, to me, there's going to be 10,000 people that change the world, and it's going to be the top 20 people at the Fortune 500 companies. And if I can help get some of those people to be like, wow, I can impact healthcare, I can impact things like environmental policy, I can impact hiring practices, I can eliminate the need for a bachelor's degree, I can say, no, cost of living is always going to be on top of merit increases. Like, who gets to make those decisions? The heads of Fortune 500 companies, and a hell of a lot faster than global governments. I get very passionate about this topic for, a handful of reasons, but all the way back to your question, PowerPoints and 2 cameras in my basement to just crank it out and make a mess in the short term just to get stuff out the door. To me, that's the only way I reasonably can get started without overthinking everything.
In your content, kind of put into perspective the limits of making money in corporate America. It's good money. It's a lot better than working in a restaurant, but like you say, it's not like a football player or a certain star. I know you say you're not necessarily making like financial decisions about what content you make, but was there a financial element to going this route because you think there's less of a ceiling?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because I believe that. I want to believe that. I need to prove that out.
Sure.
What I did to get comfortable with that is I because you get all the thoughts that swirl through your head, especially with a 12-year-old, especially with what we had become kind of comfortable with. And it could have easily just been like, you know what? Dad's just got to bite one for the team. I'll see y'all when I'm 65. I'm off to the subway. I'll be back, when the pension kicks in, if there's a pension, which actually went away a long time ago now that I think about it, I'll go and do. Millions of people have done that. And God bless them, because it's tough. And millions of people have done it. What I started wrapping my head around, especially as I started to see some of the brand opportunities come through when the book deal closed at the end of last year, and I got this presentation assignment for the president, I'm like, this is going to take me about 20 hours. Would I rather do that, or would I rather spend 20 hours coming up with what that Mr. Rogers Corporate America tutorial looks like and how that syllabus can come to life? But then as I started to sort through, all right, well, what am I doing and how am I going to make money on the other side? I built this pyramid visually for myself that was the most expensive thing that I could sell that had the smallest population of people that would buy it, down to the biggest population for whatever the product would be that I should probably do for free. So it was like executive coaching. I'm a certified executive coach. I've got, a handful of certifications to give, basically personality tests and things that Forbes say is like, hey, here are the top things that any C-level person should take to have self-awareness and blah, 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 blah. That's a small pool, and I don't want to do just that. And then there's the Corporate America 101 stuff, and I would love to be able to say, even if it's a dozen people, they learned how to write a resume, or they learned how to write a resume better because of the stuff that I did. And then in between is brand deals, brand consulting, speaking gigs. Maybe there's a world in which I'm standing up a few other things, being able to see what does that pyramid look like for me, then also made me feel more comfortable about like, here's the different levels of potential revenue opportunity and not feeling like I was locked into like one specific thing.
I don't know if this is intentional. Tell me if it is, but I think you're very smart in your business. I see a variety of creators doing this where the people you're helping now will likely rise up the ladder faster and eventually be the people who have the budget to hire you to do consulting and other stuff later in life. Is that intentional to create a long game like that, or that's happenstance?
It's happenstance, and here's why. Two things. One, the gift that LinkedIn gave me that I didn't originally see was the fact that thousands of requests that I would get for connecting were from students and entry-level employees. And I remember being like, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not attracting director, executive level people at the same type of scale and rate. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, there's more mass here. That's where the needs are, and that's where I can actually help the most. So if I'm able to have a conversation with them, I already know that I can sit in an office with the president of a large company and go through something super complicated. And, that's been proven time and time again. I also know that I can sit down, but that the interns would genuinely love to put extra time on my calendar. And but seeing the mass and seeing like where there was the most need was super helpful. And also was very grounding as well in regards to where I should lean into from a helpfulness perspective. I feel like I'm very lucky that I don't need to focus on how does that build out or how does that play out in time from who has access to budget, etc. If I can just show up and deliver the most value in any of those circumstances, or if I can get the person that oversees the budget to be like, what are these people spending time with content wise, then amazing. And I'm also trying to lean into what I did at the beginning of the content journey as well, which was continue to say yes to all of the things. So somebody has a team pep talk call that they need some help with. If I have time in my calendar and it lands in my inbox the right way, and it's a free thing, then let's do it and see how I can build case studies along the way. And then to me, the more I can get people to talk behind my back in positive ways, which is kind of the way that I looked at my career as well, then you never know where you're going to get that phone call from. You never know who's going to pop out of the clear blue sky with that one budget or that thing. At least for me, I can think myself into a corner about how do you strategically do X, Y, and Z. And there's so many different ways to look at all this stuff. Make valuable content. Do it without hardcore expectations on the other side. Do it time and time and time again. Learn from it. Be humble through the process. And if you have an unfair advantage to lean into and you're extracting it the right way without being too guarded about it. Like I was even considering OnlyFans, because like think of the tiered structure there. And these are things, because I try to be a nerd about the space.
Yeah.
What do I do with the information where it's like, if you're a first time director level employee and you're trying to hire a staff like this under these types of budget like there are really nerdy corporate spaces that I get into. And so I say OnlyFans just simply because of the way that you can kind of like access levels to different types of content. I'm just trying to organize all of it now, but just short term, keep it super simple, lean into helping with as much scale, and then see, I got another random DM this morning where it's like, that's amazing that I popped up on this person's radar. Did Ryan Holiday's podcast a couple of weeks ago. Never would have fathomed that would have been something that popped up. And I'm happy to kind of let me just be happy, go lucky dumb guy and just make stuff and lean into what I know best and see what happens.
I do think, though, that's why I love this space so much. And a lot of corporate spaces talk about doing this, but creators actually do it. A lot of the most successful people are just trying to help people for free as much as possible. And they figure out where the money comes in. But I definitely find a big hang up for new creators that we hear a lot is like, well, if I give it all away for free, why would anyone buy anything from me? And I understand that, but somehow it still works for all the creators who give it all away. So I know you say dumb guy. I think it is a strategy in itself.
It's a strategy. I use the dumb guy analogy just because it's in my, like, if you know me in real life, you know that I'm super self-deprecating. But also, I say it out loud because it helps reinforce that I don't need to be super analytical or strategic about absolutely everything, because then that's when I would get pinned into a corner. It's like, is this a YouTube or is this a podcast? Which one is more profitable? Blah, 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 blah. No, at some point you just got to you have to combine a little Warren Buffett with a little Jeff Spicoli. If anybody gets that reference from the old movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High, just have love of what you're doing and go and do.
Before we have to wrap up, I do want to dig a little in your process of, I hope I'm using the exact word, like responsibly firing yourself.
Yeah.
I'm curious, first and foremost, why you felt an obligation to the corporate world. Was it your fellow coworkers? I assume you didn't own the company. Why did you care that much versus 2 weeks and bye-bye?
Because of everything that place made me. Right. It's a 100,000 person company. I had the privilege of working on a side of the business that was more like a 3,000 person company within the larger company. I had that 240 person department that was tied to a 400 person marketing department. And because I got the job at 35, maybe because I didn't have a college degree, don't have a college degree, all of those factors, and because we lived through figuring out COVID together, because I was noted I had to fire everybody and start the place from scratch 11 years ago. The relationships that I had with my direct reports, and the relationship that I had with my boss at the time, like it felt good to hear people say, like, oh, this is the Tim that we know. Both worlds would be like, I could come across people that I hadn't worked with in 15 years, and they would just stumble upon stuff that I was doing creatively. And they'd be like, oh, I remember that dude is the guy who sat in the cube outside of my office back in the day. And then how I grew through that phase of my life, and thinking about the producer that I would have in Charlotte, that I would have the direct relationship with. And I was very much a wear your heart on your sleeve people leader. And I didn't see any other way to be like, hey, I'm out, than to do it in a like maniacally strategic way that would say, if you want the business to be as successful as possible, this is my 2 cents on it. Knowing how difficult those things can be to then execute. What's the financial impact? What are you doing with the resources after the fact? What's the communication plan? Knowing the kind of impact that I had, from a culture perspective. I rewrote the company beliefs 5 years ago. No, it's like 6 or 7 years ago. Came up with a way to gamify good behavior within the company. So like everything just pointed me in the direction of, the only way to do this is to do it in a way that is the least disruptive from a thoughtfulness, like how is everything set up? Try to push as long as obviously my boss was cool with it. And that was another fun part of it. Like the fact that I could sit there and be like, this is what I'm thinking. This is my recommendation for an org chart in the New World Order. Here's my recommendation as to what to do with the budget that you're saving by not having this headcount anymore. And to see that that was a welcome conversation versus, dude, you've become a distraction, get out of here. Like, I couldn't think of a better way to walk out the door. I actually have, and I haven't said this much out loud because I don't know who would really care, but I actually have every single annual performance review that I was given, I've redacted and put online. So if somebody was super curious and really wanted to go down the wormhole of my background, they could go and see what my boss said about me in 2013. I want that kind of transparency because the more I step up to the microphone and I'm like, yo, don't have that back and forth conversation like you just saw the TikTok where the person's like, well, I'm shutting my laptop at 5 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. I'm not here to like be the David Goggins of corporate America. I'm also not here to just make fun stuff for the sake of like, cool, look at me, I'm a creator in a fancy world now and my friends and my brands and blah, 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 blah. No, I'm here to really help. And if you want to know how sincere I am about helping, I walked out the door the right way. And I would go so far as to say, cool, you can look back at every single performance review I was ever given and read word for word outside of the financial impact or like the things that are just inappropriate to have in a public space. But about 80% of that document is kind of good to go. And it just, you see my name and you see the feedback and that's what you know. So it was the right thing to do. And I really cared just way too much about the people that I worked with to do it any other way.
We'll be right back after this brief message. What was the point you were working towards? Because I often will see people in high, powerful positions, whether it's retiring or whatever it is, they drag their feet for a long time. What was the point and how did you hold yourself accountable to that?
As far as the timing goes?
Yeah. What did it look like when you were no longer needed and you could leave?
It's funny. It was up until the end. I mean, there were things where I was like, this feels wildly inappropriate for me to even be handling this anymore within the last handful of days. I remember one of the people that I left a lot of my responsibilities to as I reshuffled things around, it was like the Monday or the Tuesday of the week that I left. And I remember jumping on a call and it was 5 or 10 minutes into it. And I was double booked that hour. And I remember putting in the chat, I'm like, I'm double booked, y'all are good. And then that person brought it up on a later call. They're like, well, that was the first time that Tim just left the meeting. I'm like, yo, I'm here for another 48 hours. I had somebody that booked a one-on-one with me my last morning. Was like, can I please get 30 more minutes? I want to pick your brain about X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, cool. And I remember, and I've got some of this captured because I was capturing almost everything. I'm half in tears coming into the office because it was just such a whirlwind too. It was when it's 4 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day for, almost a full decade and you record 4 of those years and put it on the public space. It just went by in a flash. And I'm weeping almost all day long, being is this really happening? Am I making the right decision? I don't know, but still being oh, my 11 a.m.'s here. Cool. How can I help today? So it, and I almost felt I probably left way too much stuff behind too. And, people are still God knows what they did with my office, but I tried to do whatever was most useful up until the moment that I walked out of the door. And I'm pretty confident that, to your questions, that I probably went above and beyond, and hopefully was seen all with, he always had the most positive intentions and was just trying to do right by everybody else.
It makes sense in what you want to do, but the choice to be an educator, and I don't know if you feel that way, if you feel like a teacher or you're just sharing, but in a culture where educators are so undervalued, everyone still has this narrative teachers are underpaid, but all the teachers I talk to are making insane money. What do you think the creator economy holds as a future for educators, and how do you think that'll impact conventional education?
That's a great question. I think the creators in the current space have a greater understanding as to how to truly get somebody's attention in different ways. I don't even say for the right reasons, just in different ways. A traditional educator is probably not going to think reaction videos, right? But Dr. Mike is going to think reaction videos, and he's going to teach at the same time that he's entertaining. That type of creativity, I think, is what is needed. I get a lot of questions, especially if I do, Instagram, ask me anything type of polls from teachers. And the first thing I always say is thank you. Like, you're the reason why our schools are open. You're the reason why anybody has anything to look forward to in the future wise, because you're spending time with kids, you're teaching them, you're helping them mature. Like, to your larger point, it is a grossly undervalued piece of a very critical overall infrastructure for us as humankind. What I think hopefully creators can do is show where some of your own personality can come into the mix. And it's not that teachers aren't doing that already, but expand what's really possible while still being appropriate, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And also show where it's possible that if you're just like, I don't feel like I'm fully tapping into what I can bring to the table relative to whatever my specialty is, science, math, Ali Abdal with just how effective you can run your own day, that kind of stuff. And know that there are other places to take what you're truly passionate about just to have the conversation. Because I think what's really unique and special about educators is that they care so much about the things that they do that it's what they would talk about if the cameras were off as well. And so the way I've looked at it is like, even if you went through a one-off situation, like I renovated this house from soup to nuts 13-ish years ago, the information that's stuck in the back of my head about like HVAC systems and floor types, etc., I'm not an expert in those spaces, but I'd be more than willing to help educate anybody that wanted to have that conversation. And to me, it's information sharing and experience, paying it forward from an experience perspective. And so what I think traditional educators could learn from the creators that are doing this now is how to get more comfortable with their own personality, where there could be potential business upside, just kind of leaning into what naturally gravitated you to that area overall. And how you don't know what kind of impact you could potentially have outside of where you're currently making an impact. And what I mean by that is the craving for people that are positive influences, either from a mentorship capacity, parental capacity, whatever it might be. The people that have said to me, you make growing up seem less scary. That's one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten, and I've gotten it at massive scale at this point. And to me, that was just about taking a whole bunch of different things, trying to provide value by just being transparent and sharing. Then a few things overlap, and all of a sudden you've got an opportunity, because at the same time too, we're all consumers.
Yeah.
Right? We're all wearing different branded clothes all the time. There's logos that are inherently everywhere just because that's when we open up the fridge, like what's there? Where there can be just genuine overlap between those two worlds, then all of a sudden you have an opportunity to open up revenue streams that you may not have ever thought were possible. But you're like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. That if like I worked with this brand to do this video about this thing that I was already super passionate about, maybe out of the gate, that just means that they helped me cover the $50 to go buy the extra case of bananas to do this experiment. But at least that kind of gets it out into the wild. And then you repeat that enough and it can potentially snowball. But hopefully at the end of the day, it makes everybody that much more comfortable and confident seeing that world of traditional versus, the creator educational path, that truly just being yourself and putting it out there in a way that feels good based off of how your brain sees how or why these things should be explained in the first place, that's an outlet that I think some people just need to have to make their just day-to-day that much more enjoyable, because that's who they are at their core. And I know that there's a lot of people that have that yearning of paying information forward in a fun way.
Do you think much about leaving a legacy and what that looks like, or is that not so much on your mind?
I mean, the first legacy I would want to leave is my daughter proud of what I've done and what I'm doing? Would anybody that approaches her and says, "Oh, I've seen your stuff," or "I've seen your family stuff," and that happens, are they saying it for reasons that are wholesome, I'll say? So I'd say first and foremost, it's can she be proud, especially if she looks back and is like, "I was just about to turn 12 years old when my dad left his corporate job, ... Where does the ... go? So to me, that's the legacy. Like, if I can just sustain what we had been doing, then I'm good. And if I can leave, quote unquote, a legacy of, "Oh yeah, I remember that dude. He was helpful. Like, yeah, I got that. I downloaded his resume template. Like, I remember that thing that he did about that one topic, that one time that helped me, perform better in the meeting or present with more confidence." Like, I'm good with that. There's 8 billion of us running around. So I don't, legacy to me is just simply how my family sees me and, hopefully making them proud.
Before we wrap up, couple just rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
Best slice in New York?
Giardini's, grossly underrated. It's in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, right off of the Carroll Street stop on the F&G line over here. And it is about as old school and straightforward, just neighborhood pizzeria as New York should define it. No frills. You're never going to have a bad slice, and it's going to be superior to 99% of the slices you'd have out there.
Favorite thing to do with your daughter in New York?
It is a tie between a Mets game and a Rangers game right now.
Best investment you've ever made?
I've made some really bad. This house.
Who's a celebrity or big creator you think should have an online course?
Ooh, that is a brilliant one. That doesn't already have one?
Yeah.
A guy named Jordan Studdard is the first guy that comes to mind. He's a New York City-based creator. His storytelling skills are off the charts, and his ability to actually design and create like mini sets, or I'll say props and circumstances that he can actually build with his hands to create new worlds, is unlike anything I think that most of us have seen, where they can really combine that. I see a story, I can bring that to life, but then I can actually go build all these things that are going to make it, that much more impactful. So Jordan Studdard is my answer for that one.
Top piece of advice for someone who thinks they're too old to do this?
If you think you can do something, you 1,000% can. If you think you can't do something, you still can do it. You're just making it harder for yourself. It's such a fun space to be in right now. If you're here and you're listening because you're just kind of curious as to what's possible, the answer that you probably don't want to hear is that it actually is all possible, because we want to give ourselves reasons that it's not. And it might require waking up at 4 a.m. 7 days a week for long periods of time. But if you're here for a little bit of inspiration, just know that anything I can do, you can do better. And if you're here because you're just kind of curious about the world overall as it relates to the creators and creator economy and, teaching through the creator economy, I think we're just scratching the surface, and it's going to be super fun to see where this all goes in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Tim. It's such a blast talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
What a treat.
Tim is the perfect example of what it looks like to fearlessly share your own experience in the hope that others can learn and grow from your wins and mistakes. In a world full of rules about how we're supposed to live and work, he shows us that good leadership is based in empathy, a critical mind, and a willingness to fail in the effort to help one another. I hope you learned as much as I did today, found something you can apply to your own life, and if nothing else, were inspired by Tim's story to take a hard look at the way you work and have the bravery to ask if there's a better way to do it. If you want to join the thousands of other creative entrepreneurs who are building their livelihood by sharing their experience and helping other people, click the link in the description to join the club and learn how Teachable can help you do the same. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and check out our recommended next episode linked here. Thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you in the next one.